Welcome back. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about last week and give you feedback on your inclusive teaching class for week 2. I know that you're deep into the course by this point with tons of reading and videos. That happens to be a pitfall of online classes. And I'm sorry, but I really like to read, so I'm really hoping you're enjoying your reading, especially if it's something that I'm interested in. I can guide your learning, but you have to read a lot and kind of teach yourself from the reading, right? So enjoy your reading. Try to really apply what it means to your life and to your job. Let's talk a little bit about some things that are coming up. The behavior support plan is due on June 14th, and that's coming up pretty quick. Everyone should have a partner by now. If you don't have a partner, please reach out to me quickly. You can also complete the assignment by yourself if you don't have a partner at this point. However, you can't do that with the differentiated unit plan. So if you don't have a partner, you need to let me know so I can find you a partner for the differentiated unit plan or put you with 2 other people. We've had several questions about the behavior support plan. The plan is the behavior support plan. The plan is for you to submit it through the assignment tab. It needs to be a Word doc with both of the partners' names on it, because I'm going to actually provide feedback on the document. Is the reason I need it to be a Word doc. If you upload a PDF, that's difficult for me to add comments to. You don't need to submit a reflection paper for this project. You will for the differentiated unit plan, but for this project, all I need is the assignment uploaded with both names on it. Please make sure you put both names on the assignment and that it's a Word doc. What else do we have? I need you, before you submit it, you need to make sure that you look at the assignment 2 module, at all the rubrics, at all the assignments that are in there. There's actually a template for you to follow. And also the Chapter 7 PowerPoint goes through the whole process of the FBA and the behavior support plan, so that's really helpful. You want to make sure you've looked at all of that before you submit your assignment. The differentiated unit plan is not due until June 28th, although that seems to be coming up quickly. So you want to make sure that you've looked at the modules again for that one. The technology projects are awesome. I am so impressed. As I told you last week, I really like the technology assignments. They teach me a lot, and they provide a lot of resources to your classmates. Colleen talked about Learning Ally. Teresa talked about Bookshare. Lizette talked about RazKids, all of which are reading programs to some extent. Reading programs are they're not really reading programs, but they provide different versions of the text. So you can have an e-text or you can have e-books, audiobooks. All of those things are super important when you're differentiating in an inclusive classroom. If the book that you're reading is way above the academic level of a student, then you can do a couple of things. You can find a program that will actually provide the book at the level of the student, or the student can listen to the book, right? That's a wonderful way to differentiate. Erin presented on Class Dojo. I love Class Dojo. I really wish I would have had Class Dojo when I taught. At this point, actually, yes, at this point, I have a student that I'm working with in a district who needs more reinforcement than what she gets from Class Dojo. So the teachers created a communication board or a token board with the little icon from Class Dojo, bunches of them, and Velcro on the reinforcement board. And so the student gets a token every time she does something that she's been asked to do. I'm trying to remember what the goal is. I think the goal is to raise her hand. So she gets a token, and as soon as she earns a certain number of tokens, then she gets to actually get a dojo point. So it's just a different way of using it. We learn to differentiate programs like that for students with disabilities to make it more usable, right? So we always think about how to differentiate, but I love Class Dojo. So those technology programs were wonderful this week. You guys did great on the weekly quiz. You may have noticed that I gave you a couple of extra points. That's because there were 2 questions that more than half of the class missed, which tells me it was not a good question. if that happens, I will give everyone credit for those questions. Makes sense. Let's talk about the week 2 discussions. Week 2 discussion this week was exciting for me. You guys wrote about, read about, talked about, thought about collaboration, which is huge when you are in an inclusive setting. Without collaboration, you don't have an inclusive setting. So that the collaboration is with parents, collaboration is with students, collaboration is with, sorry, the dog wants in the room. I guess you heard her scratching. Sorry about that. Collaborations with students, collaborations with parents, collaborations with your colleagues in the building. So that's teachers, school psychs, counselors. It's a big process, and it's not always easy. Before I start talking about the things that you posted, I want to point out that you guys are doing great with your posts as far as referring to other readings and to the videos and pulling it all together. I'm really impressed with this class specifically. I know that's a difficult thing to do, but you guys are doing a great job. I also know you're reading a lot, but that's important, right? Right. So let's talk about collaborating with families to understand diversity and to overcome biases. Chetna wrote that discrimination and bias in schools can be subtle. So subtle. You're so right. Sometimes we don't even know that it's going on. So it's really important to talk to families. It's really important to listen to students. It's important to reflect on our own behavior and our own thoughts to avoid our own biases, right? Because we all have them. It's there. And sometimes our biases within ourselves are subtle and we don't even know they're occurring, which is okay, but we need to reflect and we need to think so that we don't accidentally negatively impact a child. None of us want to do that. So let's talk about collaborating with families. So several of you wrote about reaching out to families at the beginning of the year. I read in your post about having welcome back night the night before school starts. That is awesome, although I'm sure that as a kindergarten teacher that would have upset me because I couldn't get the pretty pictures up on the wall the first night of school. It's really important that we reach out to parents at the beginning of the year. And it's more than just a letter. I've noticed that with some of our student teachers, they're really excited about their, hi, I'm your student teacher, and I'll be here this year, and this is who I am. It's more than that, you guys. One of you posted about a questionnaire, which I thought was wonderful. If you ask parents about their thoughts, their beliefs, about their child, parents are the ones that know their children, right? So if you ask them to tell you about the things you want to know, and it's important to do that in their native language also. Someone posted that the notes that go home to parents are available in Spanish and English. And you and I both know in New Jersey that's not enough. So that person that posted that also said that they coordinated with their ESL teacher to help translate their notes home. It's so important. How would you feel if you got a letter home in a language that you didn't understand? What do? We expect parents to go find someone to translate it for them. That's not cool, right? So we should really reach out to parents and in their language and talk to them and listen to them. It's more than just talking at them. I think many times as teachers, we talk at parents. It's really important to listen and learn about their child from them. So we do that the first week of school, right? And then we do it continuously throughout the school year. A lot of times notes go home when something bad's happened. That's not the only time notes go home. What about when something good happens? Do we tell our parents, hey, Johnny picked up the books of a girl that fell down today, or Johnny actually stayed awake all the way through class. I was really proud of him. Whatever it is, it's just really important to reach out to parents and to call parents. Call parents and say, Johnny did so-and-so. I like to talk about Johnny a lot. Talk to them, because when they see your phone number on the phone, you don't want them to automatically think, oh gosh, what has he done now? Right? Super important. It's important to think about where parents come from, and that's something that you just learn by building rapport with your parents. I had a student who was cognitively delayed and also had a behavior disorder. When he was in elementary school, his dad, who had tons of issues, and the majority of the school was actually afraid to talk to him, but I reached out to him. They lived in poverty, they lived in a horrible situation, but Dad was doing the best that he knew how. And he said to me, my son will not be placed in special education. And so I was like, instead of saying, yes, he will, because he really needs to be, I said, let's talk about that. So he was really upset, and he said to me, when I was in high school and I was in special education, I was in the I was in the broom closet at the high school. That's where my class was. And when I asked people from the district if that was true, that was true. He was taught one-on-one in a broom closet. Now, that was many years ago when I talked to him, so it was many years before that this happened. But school was not a friendly place for him, and special education was not a helpful service for him. So I had to talk to him and really gain his trust before he would allow his son to even receive services from us. So it's really important that you think about where parents are coming from, you reach out and you listen throughout the whole school year, and that you understand what their perspective is. The other thing you talked about was collaborating with other teachers. Someone wrote that it was very difficult. We should acknowledge that straight up, that collaboration with other teachers at times is difficult. We don't always see things the same. We don't always agree on the way things should be done. But we have to work together. We have to learn to collaborate, to communicate, to talk to each other in such a way that we do what's best for a student. So I don't have a lot more to talk about as far as collaboration goes. I know that you read a lot about collaboration and that you understand how important it is. Primarily, I just want to say that you guys really need to think about it and think about communication skills and how we work together in schools, because without collaboration, there's not inclusive teaching. And I think I told you last week that it's almost like a marriage, right? If you're co-teaching together. But even if you're working with a school psychologist or a school counselor, those relationships have to be built, and we have to listen to each other. The second thing that you guys did was you posted on Follow That Story. I think it's really awesome that you kept me up to date last week with the news. I think I should do that every week, except you probably wouldn't appreciate it. Your stories kind of broke into different categories. There were positive stories, and there were stories, news stories about struggles and controversies, right? So let's start with programs. You guys reported on a lot of programs that are being developed. Like Caitlin talked about a program that's to help students without disabilities get used to having students with disabilities in the general ed classroom, and vice versa. That is super important. One of the areas of research that you can read about is the concern of parents and teachers about the impact of students with disabilities on students without disabilities in general ed classroom. So are they going to be exposed to things that they don't want their students to be exposed to? Are students with disabilities going to distract and keep the students without disabilities from learning? In fact, last week Austin posted about that, about in his classroom there were a lot of times when the other kids in the classroom would laugh at the student with disabilities, which is not helping anyone, right? It's not helping the kid that's struggling, and it's not helping the kids that are learning in the classroom. So if there's a program that would actually teach them how to understand each other, to be compassionate, how to react to one another, I think that's way cool, Caitlin. So that was good. Laura talked about a program for students with disabilities between the ages of 18 and 22 that actually teaches them functional living skills. It seems as my career has moved forward, the actual teaching of functional skills has decreased a lot, and it's all become about testing, right? And about kids moving into college. Well, that's not always going to happen with our students, and even when it is, they need functional living skills. They need to know how to apply for jobs. They need to know how to ride the bus. They need to know all of those things. So I think it's awesome that there was an article about a program to do those things. Erica wrote about Unified Track and Field, which is an awesome program. I have a student, actually, a grad student that worked for Unified, or worked with Unified in the fall, and they had all kinds of successes. So that's really important. Christina wrote about a program that provides the opportunity for students to receive disabilities and awareness sensitivity programs. So that's really cool. To teach, it was to teach other students, general ed students, kind of like we talked about before, to become, it was interesting, awareness sensitivity program. Be sensitive. I don't know about you, but I'm sure that when I was younger, if there was a student with a disability, I stared, right? And my mom said, stop staring. But just stop staring is not enough. We have to teach kids to understand, and how do they respond? How do we want our kids to respond to a student who's throwing a desk across the room? What do we expect of them? And what do we expect them to learn from that? Do we expect them to learn that it's okay to throw a desk across the room? Or do we want them to learn that people have different needs? I think it's important that we teach them. People have different needs and different abilities, and and how we respond to it and why we respond to it the way we do. Austin posted about a program to teach school personnel how to detect and help adolescents experience mental health issues. This is so important to me. I know that I teach a course called School Mental Health. I don't know if I've told you guys about that before, but it's really important that as teachers we learn to recognize needs, mental health needs, and learn who to reach out to get students help. And it's also important to realize that within our schools, we have services for students, right? We have counseling services. There's things you can do in the classroom to address mental health disabilities. Not that you're a counselor, but there are strategies, and you'll learn some of that in this course. The other category that came out in your news stories was there were inspiring stories. Sarah wrote about the family of Gavin Kane, actually in New Jersey, who is, they're trying to build an inclusive playground. I wonder if that happened. It's called Tom's River Field of Dreams. I think that is so awesome. Christine wrote about a student with autism who actually thrived at college. I'm sure there are several of those. In fact, Christine, one of your classmates, responded and said she had a student that actually was doing really well in college, or was going to college. Those things are important. We can't just assume because someone has a disability they can't go to college, right? And it's interesting to reach out for them to write articles about that so that people other than us, special educators, understand that students with special needs actually are thriving out there in the world and contributing to society. Alexander wrote about a Norwich Free Academy senior who hopes to develop a fashion business for those with special needs. This student had actually noticed in 4th grade that students in her classroom with disabilities were struggling. So that kind of speaks to inclusion. She actually noticed, without someone giving her sensitivity training, that students in the room, the students with special needs, were struggling. So if we think about what we could teach students on top of that, where it could end up. Lizette wrote about an act that they're trying to pass called Respond, Innovate, Succeed, and Empower, it's called RISE Act. It's to ease transition for the students with disabilities to college. Again, it's not easy. So I talked a minute ago about how important it is that we know that students with disabilities can thrive in college, but it's not an easy transition. And it's super important that we help students understand how to make that transition, how to reach out for services. I have a student that was really struggling with a reading disability, and her high school was awesome. They helped her transition. They helped her get the services she needed. They taught her how to reach out for the help and how to advocate for herself. So those things are also important. Teresa wrote about a retiring superintendent who started an inclusion program in 2001. That was pretty much unheard of at that point. I'm sure that we did some mainstreaming, but not as much as we could have. So that's really cool. Sandra and Meredith both wrote about a mandate called Equity in IDEA that was originally proposed or passed within the Obama administration, but it's been held off because the current administration is fighting it. But a court recently ruled that the states have to report high rates of disproportionality. Actually, it was supposed to take effect in July 2018, but the court just ruled and said yes. States have to report high rates of disproportionality in discipline and in placement and in special ed eligibility. We all know that this disproportionality, right? And within discipline and within special ed placements, that's something we've struggled with for years. I can remember when I was in the classroom, probably 15, 20 years ago, when we were constantly talking about what was going on with the disproportionality, and and it wasn't okay, and people were starting to say, this is not cool, what are we going to do about it? So I'm excited to see that the court said that the disproportionality rule was to take place immediately. So those things are all positive occurrences in special education, which was really nice. We don't always hear about the positives. We hear more about the negatives. So that was really exciting that you guys found those news articles. There were also articles that talked about struggles and the controversies that are going on. Interesting, Jacqueline found an article that talked about students who were twice exceptional and how hard it was to find appropriate classroom placement resources and accommodations for those students. We had a student at the school where I was a counselor, and she was actually in a car wreck and paralyzed from the neck down, but she was in gifted and talented program before that happened. When she got to high school, her mom wanted her to be placed in the advanced placement courses, and the teachers refused and said this is not the right place for her. She had to have an aide who wrote everything. She wrote all of her work for her, so it was scripted. The student actually could speak, right? So she would tell the aide what to write. So there was questions about whether she was actually doing her own work. I think it was really funny. In one of the IEP meetings, the aide said, I couldn't do this work if I had to. I don't even understand it. That student actually did great in the AP courses once we got her in them, and she's recently graduated from college. So I'm really proud of her. So it's important to think about children who are twice exceptional, right? She was gifted, and she was also physically, she also had a physical disability. Loma wrote about accommodations. The title of the article was Many More Students, Especially the Affluent, Get Extra Time to Take the SAT. Any of you that know about my research interests know that accommodations are a central component of my concerns. And I've done some research, and I'm going to do a lot of research on the actual effectiveness of accommodations. I have some hypotheses, and actually that for students with ADHD specifically, sometimes we just throw accommodations at kids without actually looking at their needs. For example, if a student with ADHD has a hard time paying attention, then I'm not sure that extra time is the right accommodation. So it sounds sort of like, oh, you can't pay attention? Well, let me give you a little bit more time to see if you can pay attention longer. So actually, I just finished a study. I've actually done 2 that were with classroom assignments where students hated extra time. Students with ADHD hated extra time and said this is not beneficial and it's boring. So there's research coming out to talk about extended time in that case. The other situation is though but there are times when extended time is really important. For kids with slow processing deficits, for kids that need extra time, they should get it, right? If their disability is actually creating a problem with their completing the task within the time limit, then we should use that accommodation. We should also attempt to teach them to manage their time if it's possible. But if it's not, we should accommodate. So when we see reports like this that people are taking advantage of that, then it's disheartening, because if that continues, then it will become a big battle about who actually needs it and who doesn't. In fact, Loma, one of your classmates posted that her child needed extra time, and that this upset her a lot. So it's important to think about accommodations, but it's really important to think when you do accommodations or when you select accommodations, it's important to think about the needs of the child as opposed to let's give them everything and see what works, right? The accommodation should actually address the barrier that the student's having to learning, and we should collect data and see if it's working. If it's not working, then we should use something else, some other accommodation. Constance wrote about struggles of families of students with severe behavior disorders, and actually the families were having to relinquish their custody because they couldn't afford the services that students needed. And that happens. I've had that experience. It's really sad. Aaron and Colleen both wrote about classroom teachers not feeling prepared to support students with disabilities. Research says that that's true. Research says that we don't provide gen ed teachers with a sufficient education to support the needs of students with disabilities. That's also true of special ed teachers. So I think it's super important that you're taking this class and you're going to learn to work with students with disabilities, right, in general ed settings. I'll be interested to see if you think that this course has helped you to do that. I hope it does. That's our goal. Chetna wrote about my home state of Texas for their illegal special ed spending habits that they got caught in recently. It's a big ordeal. They had to pay $223 million back. It's not okay, you guys. IDEA is not funded completely at this point to begin with, so using special ed dollars for other things is not acceptable. Or, yeah, it's not cool. We have to follow the law. IDEA was written for this reason, and obviously it worked. I hope my home state gets their act together soon. There was also, Dinah wrote about an article that said that IDEA, that services under IDEA had increased by almost $6 million between 2012 and 2017-18. I think that's awesome. That means that we're doing what the law says. There's a child find component of the law that says we have to identify students in the community with disabilities, and we have to provide services. That's what special ed's all about. So that's pretty much what I have for this week. I'm excited to read your behavior support plans. You know that behavior is my area of expertise, and so I'm really excited to see what you guys have for me in that your behavior support plan. Remember, it's not an official behavior intervention plan. I just want you to be able to write a behavior support plan that you could use with students in your classrooms. I look forward to reading your posts this week and getting back to you next week. As always, feel free to email me anytime you need and let me know anything you need from me. Have a great week.